Chanty and Vasper saw David's and the rest suddenly disappear. Using Jake's teleportation power. Chanty sat down, clutching her chest. She had been struggling to breathe properly due to the tension, but she had been holding herself together to avoid being noticed. Vasper looked at her seriously, his eyes filled with concern. "Sorry if you're stressed right now," Vasper said, helping her up and pulling her into a tight embrace. "I love you." "Thank you for staying here with me," he said, a smile playing on his lips, though his eyes held a mix of happiness and sadness. Chanty smiled back, her eyes softening as she gazed into his. "I want to be with you," she said in an enticing voice. "We agreed on 7 days. Let's finish the 7 days, only 5 more to go. Then we can go back to our tasks. Who knows when we'll be able to return here?" "My father's business needs my attention," Chanty said, her voice sounding tired. "Let's go inside, we haven't eaten anything since earlier," Vasper said as they entered the living room and saw the clock showing 2 a.m. "Huh. It's already morning?" Chanty said, shocked, facing Vasper. "Yes, you fell asleep earlier, and when you woke up, it was midnight," Vasper explained, laughing as he looked at her. As they sat down on the sofa, Chanty noticed the damp spot. She glanced at Vasper with a furrowed brow, silently questioning. Vasper read her thoughts. "I didn't sit there while wet. Jake did. We both were soaked, but he sat there after I changed. I didn't bother to scold him to avoid an argument. It seemed like he did it on purpose to provoke me, but I ignored it," Vasper explained. "We'll just dry it out in the sun later," he added. "Wait here, I'll heat up some food. We have frozen pizza. What else do you want?" Vasper asked. "I'll join you in the kitchen," Chanty replied. They went to the kitchen together, searching for something to eat. After eating, Chanty didn't feel sleepy but felt physically drained, likely from the emotions she had been holding back. She felt a mix of sadness and fear that she couldn't explain. They sat in the living room, with Vasper watching her seriously. Chanty's mind wandered to the conversations she had with David. "What are you thinking about?" Vasper asked, squeezing her hand gently. Chanty looked at him with weary eyes. "David told me things about my family and his family. I can't believe our backgrounds are like this. My life will never go back to normal, Vasper," she said, her voice and eyes filled with exhaustion. "What will happen to us? What does our future hold? Will I always have to hide from your family?" she questioned. "How long will David and I have to be on guard? When will I be able to walk freely without a bodyguard, without constantly looking over my shoulder?" She buried her face in her hands, feeling utterly drained. Vasper watched her with deep concern. He had overheard the discussions between Chanty and David but didn't want to bring up those stressful topics right now. He didn't want to add to Chanty's burden after everything she had been through. He pulled her into a tight embrace. If only he could take away her worries and fears. Vasper gently held her face and kissed her deeply, conveying his love and reassurance through his kiss. "Chanty, I love you so much. Don't worry, I'm here with you. I won't abandon you. Just trust in our love, in me. I'll do everything I can to give you a life, where you don't have to hide, where you don't have to live in fear of my family," Vasper promised. Chanty clung to him, tears streaming down her face. Vasper wiped her tears away with his thumb. They held each other for a long time until Chanty began to relax, her sobs subsiding. Vasper kissed her again, gently and lovingly, offering comfort and hope. "Maybe you should sleep to feel better. You look weak," Vasper said, concerned. "I can't sleep, Vasper. Can I swim in the sea?" "The salty water might help my muscles relax," Chanty said, looking at Vasper with weary eyes. Vasper smiled softly, his eyes warm and tender. "Sure. I'll join you," he said. They walked to the shore. As the cold water touched Chanty's feet, it sent a shiver through her body, awakening her senses. She stripped down to her panties, her bare skin glistening, making her look like a goddess. Vasper couldn't take his eyes off her, mesmerized by her beauty. Chanty closed her eyes, savoring the sensation of the seawater, hoping the waves would wash away her troubles. She felt her body slowly come alive, her veins and entire being tingling with a new awareness. When she opened her eyes, Vasper was in front of her, his eyes dark with desire. He smiled at her, a slow, sultry smile that made her heart race. He leaned in, capturing her lips in a passionate kiss, his tongue exploring hers. Despite the cold water and wind, Vasper's kisses ignited a fire within her. His hands roamed over her breasts, making her gasp, the heat from his palms sending waves of sensation through her body, making her feel like she was floating. "I love you so much, Chanty," Vasper murmured between kisses. His lips and tongue trailed down her neck, and Chanty found herself gasping for air, her moans mingling with the sound of the waves. Vasper's mouth moved to her breasts, and she inhaled deeply, her mouth open, whispering Vasper's name as she felt the heat from his mouth and tongue. Vasper captured her open mouth in a searing kiss, his heat drawing out the essence of her breath, their lips desperately seeking each other. Chanty's fingers tangled tightly in Vasper's hair as he worshipped her breasts, her body feeling like it would burst from the heat. Her legs wrapped around Vasper's hip, feeling the hardness of his desire. Vasper's hands gripped her thighs, guiding her grinding movements. His eyes were filled with the fire of their intense romance. "Ah, Chanty. Help me stop, or I might not be able to," Vasper moaned, his body hot despite the cold water and air. Chanty had only one thought, to satisfy her body's craving. She moved aggressively, her body burning, until she removed her panties. "No!" Vasper exclaimed. "Please! Stop me," he pleaded, panting and moaning, not stopping his kisses from her lips to her breasts. "Why?" Chanty asked, her voice like a siren's call to Vasper's ears, igniting his desire further. "Don't stop, Vasper," Chanty said, her hands slipping into Vasper's shorts, grasping what she wanted, making Vasper's body burn hotter, his grunt of her name, music to her ears. His restraint hanging on a thread. But Vasper managed to stop. They suddenly found themselves on the sand, Chanty beneath Vasper. Chanty was surprised by the sudden change of location. "Please," Vasper moaned, against her lips. "Cool me down." They both breathed heavily, trying to catch their breath. Chanty felt Vasper struggle, his body trembling, biting his lips, his eyes burning with intense passion. "Please help me to cool down," Vasper said. Chanty slowly removed her hand from Vasper's shorts, placing her palm on his chest, feeling the strong beat of his heart. Chanty could feel Vasper's muscles tensing, fighting against the heat radiating from his body. His hands clenched the sand tightly, and their chests heaved with their rapid breathing. Vasper's eyes burned with intense desire as they traced Chanty's open mouth, which gasped for air. Both of them were struggling to restrain their bodies from the overwhelming pleasure. God knows, this was the hottest Vasper had ever looked, his chest rising and falling rapidly. Chanty could hardly stand it, avoiding looking directly into Vasper's eyes for fear of losing control. Instead, she turned her gaze to the muscles in his arms. She heard a soft chuckle from Vasper in a husky tone, which only intensified her feelings of torture. He seemed to understand her movements, determined to help them both relax. The sand beneath them was cool, a stark contrast to the fiery passion that roared within their bodies. Chanty could feel every muscle in Vasper's body tense and strain, his hands clutching at the sand as if it were the only thing keeping him grounded. She could see the sweat glistening on his skin, hear the ragged breaths that matched her own. Their eyes met again, and the intensity of his gaze sent a shiver down her spine. She saw the fire there, the burning need that matched her own, and it took every ounce of strength she had to look away. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat echoing the desperate rhythm of their bodies. The effort to remain still, to keep their desires in check, was almost more than she could bear. Vasper's soft chuckle broke the silence, a low, husky sound that sent a jolt of electricity through her. It was a sound filled with understanding and shared struggle, a reminder of the bond they shared. He knew exactly how she felt, and that knowledge made their restraint all the more powerful. Determined to help them both find some semblance of calm, Chanty slowly moved her hands to cover her breasts. The sensation of her own touch was a small comfort, a reminder of the need to stay grounded. She focused on the feeling of the sand beneath her, the cool breeze on her skin, anything to distract herself from the raging inferno within. Time seemed to stretch on forever, each second a battle against their own desires. But as they breathed together, their hearts gradually began to slow, their bodies finding a fragile equilibrium. It was a delicate balance, one that could be shattered with a single look, a single touch. But for now, they held on, united in their struggle to remain in control. Chanty could see the effort it took for Vasper to relax, the way his muscles slowly unclenched, his breathing steadied. She followed his lead, letting the tension drain from her own body, feeling the cool sand against her skin. It was a small victory, but in that moment, it was enough. As their breathing synchronized, the intensity of their emotions began to ebb, leaving a lingering warmth that spoke of their connection. Chanty allowed herself a small smile, knowing they had faced the storm together and emerged stronger for it. The heat of their desire was still there, a constant undercurrent, but for now, they had found a way to keep it at bay. Their eyes met once more, and this time, the look they shared was one of mutual understanding and respect. They had come so close to the edge, but together, they had pulled back. It was a reminder of the strength they found in each other, a promise of what was to come. Vasper reached out, his fingers brushing lightly against her cheek, a tender gesture that spoke volumes. "It's cold," he murmured, his voice still tinged with the remnants of their struggle. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, and they shared a moment of quiet intimacy, waiting for their breaths to calm. Minutes passed like statues on the sand. When their breathing relaxed, Vasper smiled at her again and gave her a quick kiss. "Let's go," Vasper said, hugging her again because she was naked, the wind chilly. They suddenly found themselves in the bathroom, thanks to Vasper's power. "Let's rinse off," Vasper said, and disappearing from her view. Chanty showered, her mind replaying the recent events, nearly losing herself. She was grateful Vasper had strong control, preserving her virginity. "I'm sorry, Vasper. If that had happened, what would David think?" She continued showering, scrubbing her body with soap, nearly forgetting everything. After her shower, Chanty dried her hair with a blower, applied lotion to her skin, and checked the clock. It was almost 5 a.m. She slipped into a comfortable t-shirt and jogger pants, planning to jog around the island. She tied her hair into a ponytail and stepped out of her room, noticing that Vasper was not in the living room, but she could hear noise from the kitchen. Curiosity piqued, she made her way to the kitchen, where she found Vasper dressed in a fresh white shirt and denim shorts. His hair was still damp, making him look incredibly handsome. He was setting up the coffee machine, and when he noticed her, he smiled meaningfully, a smile that reminded her of their recent torturous pleasure. Her heart fluttered as she approached him, her mind racing with memories of their intense romance. "Almost done," Vasper said with a smile. "You'll be able to make a cappuccino soon." She smiled back, feeling the warmth of his words. After a few minutes of trial and error, the coffee machine was ready, and Vasper made 2 cups of cappuccino. The first sip was heavenly, rich and meaningful, like a reward for their struggles. They sat in the living room, sipping their coffee while Vasper discussed what dish Chanty wanted to request. "What are your plans for today?" Vasper asked, his voice soft and intimate. "Aside from practicing sword fighting later?" "Let's go jogging," Chanty replied with a smile, excited to see the island. They both glanced outside as the sun began to rise, revealing the pristine white sand and turquoise sea. "Wow." Chanty stood and stepped onto the balcony. Vasper followed her, wrapping his arms around her from behind. They both smiled in awe at the stunning sunrise and the beauty of their surroundings. Chanty felt a profound sense of peace wash over her as she looked around, considering this place a paradise where she could live forever. As she gazed at the sand where they had struggled to restrain themselves, she blushed, remembering how Vasper's hands had clenched the sand. It was a vivid reminder of their intense struggle. She felt her face heat up, and Vasper, noticing her reaction, followed her gaze. A mischievous smile curled his lips as he tightened his embrace. "I love you so much," he whispered in her ear, his breath warm against her skin. Chanty turned to face Vasper, their eyes locking in a silent conversation. "I love you too, Vasper," she replied, her voice barely a whisper. Their lips met in a passionate kiss, each second stretching into an eternity. When they finally pulled apart, their eyes continued to speak volumes, filled with unspoken emotions. She tugged Vasper inside to finish their coffee before they went jogging. After finishing their coffee, they headed downstairs with white face towels and tumblers, starting their jog. Vasper knew they would pass by the beach where they had fought last night. As they jogged at a slow pace, Chanty glanced around, taking in the surroundings. When they reached the area, she saw the chaos on the beach and in the forest ahead. Her brow furrowed, noticing the destruction that hadn't been there the last time she and Vasper had watched the sunset. She stopped, scanning the area. It looked unnatural, as if it had been plowed, with trees toppled over and signs of fire. What happened here? Was this the noise I heard last night? Thunder and lightning? Is it possible the trees were struck by lightning? Chanty wondered aloud, her voice trembling with a mix of curiosity and fear. Vasper faced her seriously. I fought with Jake and Jacob last night while you were still asleep, he said, his voice low and intense. Chanty was stunned, unable to speak as she took in the aftermath of their fight. It seemed impossible that this was just the result of a battle. Sorry. I tried to hold back, but Jacob and Jake pushed me to my limit. That's why we were both wet when you saw us. Chanty couldn't believe the destruction around her. It reminded her of the fight at David's forest villa, but the beach was utterly ruined. Good thing I was asleep. I might have fainted if I had seen your fight, she said, her voice shaking. It's scary when men fight, she added. Let's go to the other side. Vasper took her hand, and they instantly teleported to the other side of the beach, where the damage was still evident but less severe. They continued jogging, reaching a rockier part of the beach with large stones along the shoreline. When they reached a large, flat rock, they sat down, holding hands. Sweat trickled down Chanta's face, but Vasper showed no signs of exertion. He wiped her face from forehead to neck, and when he reached her neck, he kissed her, moving towards her lips. Their eyes spoke volumes as they exchanged sweet smiles. I wonder, Vasper, Chanty began, her voice soft and curious, even though your fights are intense, your clothes remain intact. But the battlefield looks destroyed. Vasper laughed heartily, and Chanty couldn't help but join in. It's true, she continued, last night, Jake and Jacob looked untouched, and so did you. But the place is completely wrecked. I've never seen you laugh like this, Vasper. She was mesmerized by his laughter, finding him impossibly, strikingly handsome, especially his eyes and lips. Even a small glimpse of his teeth when he smiled was enough to drive her wild. His voice sent shivers down her spine, making her admire her self-control during their earlier intimate moment. Vasper, still smiling, explained, our bodies are different from ordinary humans, Chanty. In battle, our defense is at an optimum level. The impact doesn't directly hit our bodies because we have a defensive barrier. But the further away the impact, the stronger it is, especially for ordinary people. We only get hurt in serious, life-threatening fights. Last night was just a way to blow off steam. Chanty was mesmerized by Vasper's explanation and his sweet, attractive smile. Is it really that difficult for you to blow off steam? The forest gets destroyed, she said, shaking her head in disbelief. Vasper laughed again, pulling her into a kiss. This time, she didn't hold back. She had wanted to kiss him since earlier, her desire growing with each passing moment. Chanta's hands wrapped around Vasper's neck, and she straddled his lap, desperately seeking his lips and tongue. Vasper's body responded to her heat, his hands moving under her t-shirt, caressing her skin with an urgency that matched her own. When Chanty ground her hips against Vasper, she heard him groan deeply, a sound that sent a thrill through her entire body. It only spurred her on, their kisses growing hotter and more fervent. Vasper's embrace tightened around her, his hands exploring every inch of her body. Chanty felt the hardness against her, their eyes meeting in a shared moment of burning desire that was impossible to contain. She smiled playfully. I love you, Vasper, she whispered, lightly biting his lips. You've become a dangerous lady, Vasper replied in a breathy, husky voice. As she moved to get off his lap, Vasper held her firmly. Where are you going? Finish what you started, he said, his voice a mix of command and plea. He pulled her close, and in seconds, they were on the bed, their bodies tangled together in a heated embrace. Their romance continued with an intensity that left them both breathless. Vasper's hands and kisses explored Chanty's body, bringing her to the edge of intense pleasure without crossing the final line, keeping her virginity intact. She reciprocated with equal fervor, their bodies finding immense joy and satisfaction in each other's touch. Moans and groans filled the house as they chased their release. They reached new heights of pleasure. When they finally caught their breath, they lay naked, their eyes communicating silently. Chanty rested her head on Vasper's arm as he held her tightly, and they both drifted off to sleep, exhausted from the night's events and their lack of proper rest. The intensity of their emotions and the atmosphere of their surroundings created a bond that felt unbreakable, a love that burned brighter with each passing moment. A warm sensation on her lips and neck roused Chanty from her sleep. She slowly opened her eyes to find Vasper smiling down at her. "It's almost noon," Vasper said, his voice barely above a whisper. She smiled and stretched, nodding at Vasper, but he quickly leaned in and kissed her again, showering her with kisses. They laughed together, holding each other close on the bed. Chanty reached for her clothes that were within arm's reach on the bed and began to change while still lying down. She had intended to change her panties as well, but Vasper playfully stopped her, not allowing the garment to be pulled up. They ended up laughing at Vasper's mischievousness. "Another round?" Vasper groaned as he gently nibbled on her lips. Chanty chuckled. "What are you doing?" "I thought we were getting ready for lunch," she said, still giggling as Vasper's weight pressed down on her, making it hard for her to move. "Later," she whispered into his ear, causing Vasper to laugh as he helped her up after she had finally put on her panties. She finished getting dressed, and they both headed out of the room. In the living room, they found the food already set up, a special dish that Vasper had ordered from a restaurant. They enjoyed their lunch together happily, the sound of the waves crashing outside and the chirping of birds creating a peaceful backdrop. They seemed like a married couple, caring for their home after their meal. They did their laundry, using the washing machine, and Chanty laughed as they hung the clothes out to dry behind the house. "I never knew Vasper Mondragon could do laundry," Chanty teased as she watched him work. "I'd be embarrassed if I had been alive for so long and didn't know how to do the simple things humans do," Vasper replied with a laugh, causing her to laugh at his response. "Do you know what's missing in this house?" he asked, piquing Chanty's curiosity. "What is it?" she asked. "A child," he answered. "The only thing missing here is a child running around, causing trouble for us," he said, laughing. But Chanty was stunned by his words, her expression changing as she fell silent. Vasper noticed her sudden quietness. "What's wrong?" Vasper asked, moving closer to her and wrapping his arms around her. He lifted her face to meet his gaze. "It's one of my dreams for us, Chanty, to create a family with you." He kissed her deeply on the lips, a kiss filled with passion and longing. "But that can't happen until we step out of the shadows of our lives," he continued. "You're the woman I want to be my queen. In the outer world, they call it a wife. I want to introduce you to the entire world as my wife, but for now, we can't because we're still hiding in the shadows of my family." She listened quietly, unable to speak, but she was happy about Vasper's plans, as they mirrored her own dreams. Yet, a question lingered in her mind: was such a thing possible given their situation? They were in hiding and couldn't show themselves to the public. How could they fulfill their dreams? Vasper was the man she wanted to spend the rest of her life with. "Vasper, you're the man I want to be with for the rest of my life. Is that possible in our situation?" Chanty asked, her eyes filled with hope and her voice trembling as she spoke to Vasper. He kissed her again. "Yes. We will make it possible, Chanty. We'll make it possible. What's important is that you trust our plans, trust our love, and we will make everything possible. Just believe in my plans. For now, it may be difficult to start, but it's not impossible." He led her to the front of the house, to the balcony. "This place will be our witness to our dreams," he said. "This is our paradise, born from our love and dreams, where everything we wish for will become possible." She turned to face Vasper, and they kissed again. The sound of the waves and the gentle breeze bore witness to their words and dreams for their future. That night, they began their usual sword practice by the beach. This time, however, they focused on training with a blindfold. Vasper covered Chanty's eyes, but not before their customary kiss. They had only one sword since the other had been broken during a previous practice with Jake and Vasper. "Chanty, your goal is to wound me, okay?" Vasper instructed. Despite knowing that Vasper's wounds healed quickly, Chanty felt hesitant. "You won't learn if you're hesitant to attack. Trust your senses," Vasper urged, his voice commanding. She nodded, trying to focus. The world around her fell silent. She could only hear the waves crashing and the night insects chirping. She planted her sword in the sand, listening intently to the sounds around her, relying on her instincts. Minutes passed as she stood motionless, the cool wind blowing through her hair. Her entire focus was on her hearing. Suddenly, her skin prickled, not from the cold but from a heightened sense of awareness. She swiftly swung her sword to the right. Listening again, she felt the prickling sensation once more, this time from behind her. She spun around, slashing her sword in what she felt was her fastest move. Minutes passed as she continued this, unsure if her movements were correct, but she persisted. Vasper remained silent. She paused, senses on high alert, her skin prickling again. Trusting her instincts, she swung her sword to the left, feeling resistance as her sword connected with something. She quickly removed her blindfold and saw Vasper holding the tip of her sword, blood dripping from his finger and thumb, which were grasping the blade. He smiled at her, advancing slowly. She panicked at the sight of the blood, dropping the sword and rushing to Vasper. "I'm sorry," she said, looking at his hand and fingers. "You're good, Chanty, a good start. More practice and you'll get it," Vasper said excitedly, offering his conclusion. She took Vasper's hand and wrapped the blindfold around the wound, but the blood kept flowing. As she had done many times before when they were younger and got hurt, she began sucking the blood from Vasper's finger. This simple act, once so innocent, took on a new intensity. Vasper stood there, transfixed by what Chanty was doing. She turned to face him, his finger still in her mouth. Their gazes locked, but Vasper's eyes were different, filled with something deeper. Chanty felt a thrill as she thought of how to escalate Vasper's emotions. She opened her mouth, letting her tongue linger on his finger. Vasper's response was immediate and intense. He pulled her into a tight embrace, capturing her lips with his. Their kisses were filled with burning desire, as if they were searching for something within each other's mouths. They moved urgently back to their room, where they continued what they had started, seeking and finding their ultimate pleasure together. Breathless and laughing, they lay beside each other, their laughter a release from the intensity of their practice. Determined, Chanty knew she had to practice more. They returned to the beach, continuing until she was exhausted. She felt a newfound understanding of how to focus her hearing, feeling content with the progress, especially since Vasper was the one guiding her. After her practice, Chanty decided to take a shower. She thought of wearing the nightie that Vasper had bought for her the first time. After all, it would only be Vasper who would see her in it. She put on the nightie and faced the mirror. Her mouth fell open at the sight. The nightie revealed a lot of cleavage and the hem was so short it barely covered her panties. She understood why people commented on her appearance, saying her face matched her age, but her body looked like that of a woman in her 20s. She probably took after her mother, who was also a beautiful woman with a figure fit for a beauty queen. She admired herself in the mirror, though she felt uneasy wearing such a revealing outfit. Her freshly dried hair cascaded around her shoulders. Just as she was about to change back into her regular clothes, the door to the room opened and Vasper walked in. "Dinner's ready," he began to say, but his words trailed off when he saw her. Both of them froze, Vasper staring at her, and Chanty, caught in the moment, staring back at him, realizing she was wearing the nightie. She quickly grabbed a blanket and covered herself, smiling nervously. "I was just about to change." "I'm not finished yet," she said, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. But Vasper didn't waste a second. He moved closer to her, pulling the blanket away and wrapping his arms around her waist. "Are you embarrassed by me?" "I've already seen everything," he murmured, his breath hot against her skin. "You become more beautiful to me every day, Chanty," Vasper added, his voice low and husky. Her cheeks burned even more at his words. Despite Vasper having seen her naked many times before, she couldn't help but feel shy. It always felt like the first time. How could she explain these feelings? Vasper gently lifted her chin, bringing their lips together. It seemed they could never get enough of each other, always craving the heat and intimacy they shared. She dreamed of a time when they wouldn't have to hold back, when they could fully give themselves to each other without restraint. She wanted to truly possess Vasper, and for Vasper to possess her completely, free from the constraints that currently held them back. She longed for the day when their love and desire could be fully expressed without any barriers. After their shared dinner, a heavy rain started pouring down, accompanied by occasional flashes of lightning and the distant rumble of thunder. As the wind picked up, they hurriedly closed all the windows and sliding doors to keep the strong gusts at bay. They tidied up the dining area, and Chanty went to brush her teeth. She returned to the living room, listening to the soothing sound of the rain, which was especially relaxing at night. She could hear Vasper in the outdoor bathroom. Chanty then walked back to her room and lay down on the bed, enjoying the calming rhythm of the raindrops. When she opened her eyes, Vasper was standing beside the bed, wearing only his boxer shorts. His physique was absolutely impressive, with well-defined muscles. And his strikingly attractive handsome features she knows no woman can resist. She couldn't help but smile at the thought. Although she was still a virgin, she understood the standards of attractiveness and desire. And Vasper is on the highest standards. She couldn't help but wonder what it would feel like to finally be with Vasper, to truly feel him inside her. Her thoughts made her flush with warmth. Vasper noticed where her eyes were lingering and smiled, but he didn't let on. He lay down next to her and pulled her into his arms. She hugged him tightly, relishing the warmth of his body and the strength of his embrace. She entwined her leg with his, and Vasper tightened his hold on her. "I love you so much," he whispered, his voice breathy and enticing. "I love you too, Vasper," she replied, and their lips met again in a passionate kiss. "What were you thinking about earlier?" Vasper asked between kisses, smiling playfully. "Nothing," she replied, embarrassed to share her earlier thoughts. She smiled to herself, feeling mischievous. Vasper sensed her amusement but didn't press further. "Why did we struggle so much earlier on the beach?" Chanty asked, remembering their difficulties. It was funny now, thinking back on it. Their eyes met, and Vasper smiled. "So, that's what you were thinking about," he said with a mischievous grin. She nodded, laughing with him. Before he could respond, Vasper kissed her deeply. "Our bodies were so hot, and your movements made it even hotter," he said in a low, seductive tone. Chanty felt her body react to his words, her heart racing. At that moment, I really wanted to go all the way. "We were so close," Vasper continued, his eyes filled with longing. His hand moved lower, making her breath quicken. "But we can't make a mistake, Chanty. For our future, we can't slip up," Vasper said, his voice firm yet filled with desire. He showed her with his fingers just how close they had been. Chanty remembered the intense heat they felt, grateful they had managed to hold back. "You looked so hot then." "It was torture," Chanty said in a sultry voice, surprising Vasper. Realizing what she had said, she felt a wave of embarrassment. Her face flushed, but Vasper's eyes burned with even more intensity. He captured her mouth in a fervent kiss, their bodies igniting once again with passion. The sound of the rain outside was the perfect backdrop to their shared moment of joy, a joy they both longed to fully experience one day without any restraints.